everyone. Thank you. So Brookline for Everyone started in 2019, so it wasn't too long ago, with just a handful of interested pro-housing advocates. And in just a short time, this pro-housing group has ramped up to be a pro-housing superforce. We, Abundant Housing Massachusetts, linked up with Brookline for Everyone this last spring, co-leading a text banking initiative where we got out 60,000 texts to get out the vote, and there were also a lot of visibility initiatives. It was a stunning victory. Brookline for Everyone was able to help elect 52 out of 64 endorsed candidates to office, primarily town meeting, including 26 new pro-housing candidates to town meeting. So it's just a stunning story. In this hour, we hope to co-share, Brookline for Everyone will be co-sharing ideas of best practices and building a strong local pro-housing force. Now, the people who are here tonight, there may be differences in your community. Not everything we discuss tonight will apply. Some of you may come from cities with city councils and mayors. Others of you may come from towns with town meeting, just like Brookline. Some of you may have no intentions of starting a political action committee. So we urge you to take the nuggets tonight that you want, and you can leave the rest. So it is our intention to create a really safe space, a community tonight for mentorship and building connections across our AMA network. And we would appreciate the importance of confidentiality and respect. The panel part of this portion, we have about 8 or 9 questions to the panel that is going to be taped. But during the Q&A session afterwards, we will be shutting off the recording. The taped part of the panel will be posted online, available only for members. So I want to let people know who have joined us that over 103 people registered for this workshop, coming from 26 different cities and towns. So as in terms of the format, as I mentioned, we are going to have this panel. We'll be asking our panelists direct questions. You can write your own questions if it generates a question in the chat. And we will also have 15 minutes on the other side for your open questions and more of a give and take. And some of the panelists have even agreed to stay after the official hour to continue the discussion. So I want to get to the fun part of this, which is introducing our incredible panel. And I first want to start by introducing the 2 other Abundant Housing Massachusetts staff people who are here with us tonight. Julia Davidovitz. And Julia, maybe can you raise your hand or make—
Hi. Yeah. So good to be here. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Yes, Julia is also the other regional organizer. She and I started together. And then Cheryl Daniel. So Cheryl,
welcome everyone. Thank you for coming.
Cheryl is our new director of communications, and all the PR materials for this workshop tonight, everything color coded. She's so amazing at this, and she's going to keep us on track. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. I'd like to first introduce Catherine Henschen. Catherine, are you— just let people know where you are.
Here. Hi, all.
Yay. Catherine is an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies and Political Science at Northeastern University. She researches the intersection of I'm losing my notes, of digital communication, voter turnout. This work is informed by the 8 years she spent managing political campaigns in Texas And Brookline for Everyone is just so blessed to have that kind of expertise on the board. So welcome to Catherine. I'm not going to introduce Jonathan now because he's coming a little bit later. So I want to go on to Katha. Katha, can you just raise your hand, let people know where you are? So Katha is a sculptor, painter, and production designer for television. Besides an extensive exhibition record, she has received 3 Emmy Awards for her work designing drama documentaries. As part of Building a Better Brookline, Catherine helped design and plan their Brookline Arts Community Engagement Project. Katha believes by combining the arts of storytelling and visual expression with data, Brookline for Everyone can create a compelling vision of Brookline's future that includes more abundant, affordable housing. So Jeff Wachter, I hope I got that right. Jeff, hi, lives in Brookline Village with his wife and 3 children. He has a master's degree in history, focusing on 20th century American cities, and previously worked as an urban policies researcher. His interest is in using zoning reform and housing policy as a tool to address some of the structural challenges Brookline and the Boston metro area face today. Jeff is a co-founder and board member of Brookline for Everyone. He's helped shepherd warrant articles through town meeting, led the candidate endorsement and efforts, and keeps community members apprised with being the co-editor of a weekly newsletter. It comes out every single week. So with those introductions, and we'll introduce Jonathan later when he comes, we're going to dive right into this. So we're going to start with a question for Jeff. Jeff was one of 1 or 2 founders of Brookline for Everyone. So we'd love to know, can you tell us the origin story of Brookline for Everyone? How did Brookline for Everyone start out? Who and how did it begin? And how did the early advocates find each other? Some people in this audience, there's maybe 1 person in their town. So if you could talk about that and talk about creating the initial board, that would be very helpful. And I'll mute myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joyce. So Brookline for Everyone really started out of, I guess in one sense, frustration from my wife by having me spend so much of my time arguing with people on the town Facebook group, which for all of you with local Facebook groups, you understand the challenges that those can sometimes face. And so she was basically like, stop just telling me about all the problems or people who are frustrating and do something about it. So I went back through previous posts and comments on Facebook and identified people who liked, who commented in similar ways, found other people who thought somewhat similarly. And we just randomly reached out to them and messaged them. We messaged probably about 20, 25 people and said, we see you're supportive of more housing in Brookline, and we can actually do something with the accessibility of local government and politics. So we got together probably about 8 to 10 people in our living room in the fall of 2019 and kind of talked through what we could do to actually try to make a difference. And that was the basic genesis of Brookline for Everyone. We were very lucky to find people that that had a lot of different skill sets. We had PhD students, we had empty nesters, we had people from various walks of life, a lot of renters. We were renting at the time as well, and kind of all recognized that the core of addressing housing unaffordability and in Brookline and Massachusetts and really in most places across the country, we know the answers to the problem. We know the policy solutions that people have implemented all over the country, and ultimately it's a political challenge. And we also thought that most of the people, or a lot of people in town, really did agree with us. It was just a matter of the people who were most engaged in politics were relatively unrepresentative of a significant section of the town. And so we basically got together at that point, started telling people about local town meeting issues, local boards and commission hearings, things like that, to encourage people to show up to give a counter to the standard story that most people heard at those meetings, which is this project needs to be smaller, this project needs to not even happen, this project's going to cause all these problems. So we initially started trying to send people to those meetings to say, we actually like this, and we're not that worried about the traffic. And yeah, the construction will be annoying, but once it's built, it's really important that we have more homes for people. And so that was kind of that's the genesis of how we got going.
Thanks, Jeff. That's very helpful. Just a reminder for people that if you have questions and you want to put them in the chat, that's one option. And you can also keep your questions for the end, but please feel free to put questions in the chat. So this really tags on to your answer, what you just talked about, Jeff, about the just starting out. It was about growing a base. You were able to explain, you started with 8 people in your living room, identifying them through maybe people liking things on Facebook. So what are some more initial strategies you used to build that base from those 8 people? What was the rate of growth, and how many members do you have now, or at least are on the mailing list? And also another part of this question, sorry to throw so many at you, but how do you keep in touch with these members? I know that you're one of the only AMA groups that uses Every Action, so maybe it would be helpful for people to hear of how you use that tool in sort of reaching out to the membership.
Yeah, certainly. So I think a lot of at the very beginning, it was trying to figure out what things we wanted to address. We started looking at, we started posting about what we were up to on Facebook. We set up a Twitter account, started talking about housing in Brookline. There's a pretty, I think, as one of our past select board members likes to say, there's a Brookline 500. That's pretty much the small subset of the population that is really most engaged in local politics. So we started partly by approaching those people, kind of looking at past town meeting votes to see who voted in ways that might have gone against the grain in support of more housing. We would go to, as we were encouraging folks we would announce things on Facebook or on social media. As they would show up at local meetings, we would take note of who those people were. And then we leveraged some other organizations that were kind of getting going around the same time. I know Jonathan will speak a little bit more to this, but there was a group of faith communities that had started, had a couple of sessions totally unrelated to what we were up to in that same fall of 2019, talking about the history of redlining and Richard Ralston's book, and kind of talking about the connections between social justice and racial justice and housing, and how those have often gone hand in hand over the last decades. So we were able to connect with Jonathan in that way to continue growing. And then a lot of it just became word of mouth as the more we existed, the more we talked about things, the more we were able to find people to jump on board. I know rate of growth. So we had our official kickoff in January of 2020 with big plans to have lots of in-person events and meetings, and that was not a great time to have those plans. But probably about 50 or 60 people came out to a local bar, which felt like a great kickoff. It coincided with one of our board members who actually had a book recently released. Then it was the same night as his event at the Booksmith, so he pushed people to come to the event as well. And we started kind of inching forward in that regard. We started with a Google Groups list that probably had 200 or 300 people on it at its peak before we transitioned, before AMA kind of got going and we were able to transition to utilize some of their tools. So yeah, we definitely imported our mailing list into so Action Network at the time, and I believe Every Action is the new network. I get it mixed up. And this is just a great tool to identify folks, to tag them, to say, okay, these people just came out for our meeting, or they're more likely to know people. They're in different precincts, so they're going to be helpful to get their friends out to for election activities, things like that. And then organize our mailing list, because ultimately we did it so that we'd have a consistent weekly email that we would send out, which we send out every Sunday. Oh, and right now that list is about 950 people. So we definitely have grown a lot over the last couple of years.
Wow, 950 people since 2019. Wow. So this question is actually towards for Catherine. One of the things that some people who registered for this workshop tonight noticed that the panel is all white. So I wanted to name that, and we thought that it would be important to kind of put that out into the room, into this discussion. About the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our pro-housing work. So this is a question, as I said, for Catherine. In what ways has leadership aimed to center equity and inclusion in building Brookline for everyone? For example, how have you approached including historically excluded and marginalized voices into your base and leadership, such as people of color, renters, people who live in public housing? How, if at all, are issues of power and privilege addressed? And what are the areas of growth for Brookline for everyone in this area? So I will turn it over to Catherine.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's definitely an issue in our organization. Arguably, it's an issue I've seen across pro-housing groups in here and other places that I've lived. So it's important to recognize that. I do want to say that our board overall is more diverse than the folks on this panel. Our board does include people who are people of color and board members who fit into a lot of different axes of diversity. So race, ethnicity, religion, and disability. But not everyone on the board is involved in the election specific work or was involved this year due to like preferences and what people wanted to do and how they wanted to participate. Part of the challenge, I think, Brookline has some specific, I want to talk about some demographic challenges. Then I want to talk a little bit about my personal concerns around tokenism. Brookline is not very diverse in a traditional measure. There's only 2.3% of the population is Black, 6.6% is Hispanic. Brookline does have a very substantial Asian population, and that's, I think, an important aspect. And of course, Asian is like a problematic monolith, right? There's East Asian, Southeast Asian. There's lots of different Asian communities here. The other issue is that this is economic diversity fits in here too, right? Because who has the time to be able to do this kind of work, right? Can renters versus homeowners, young folks who are just getting started out, retirees who are maybe on a fixed income, who has the capacity to get involved in a town where the housing is unaffordable, right? That intersects as well. The economic issues intersect with the some of the racial and ethnic issues as well. One thing that I've experienced in a lot of organizing work that I've done is there's this desire to kind of hire a token Black person or a token Hispanic person. Personally, I don't think that's respectful of the population. So part of the challenge is identifying people who share our interest to also represent lots of different forms of diversity. But another challenge, this is a town with 40,000 registered voters, and like Jeff was saying, you know, like the Brookline 500, I can name for you several prominent activists in town who are all completely overburdened because everyone is asking them to be the token Black person or the token Hispanic person. And so I think part of the challenge broadly is to keep casting a very wide net and keep bringing in lots of people and then seeing who is interested and then cultivating people to be board members and to be involved. And, you know, being a board member may not be something that everybody can commit to in terms of time or financial contribution, but there is definitely a way for people to get involved in a way that matches their skills and what they can do. The other thing that's really ironic is that a lot of Brookline's population of color are non-citizens. So while non-citizens can and should be involved in the struggle for more housing, they can't vote, right? And that's something I would love to see changed in Massachusetts, that people can vote in local elections regardless of immigrant status. And so we're very mindful of that. And so it's an open challenge. I don't have an exact answer for you, but I will just say it is something that we are heavily discussing about how we can meaningfully engage diverse populations and look to elevate a broader range of the people who live in Brookline to be involved in pro-housing work.
Thank you, Catherine. It really, it's very appreciated. Yeah, I appreciate your talking about it's an area of growth for Brookline for everyone, but at the beginning of what you said, it's also something that we maybe need to do a deeper dive on as a movement. And so I know that there's going to be some feedback on this, and we're just touching on this, but this may be something that we want to have a larger a discussion about, training about, you know, in the movement. And I could go on, but I'm facilitating, so I'm going to go to the next question. And I'm going to bring Katha in. Yeah, but I just wanted to highlight that this is a really important issue that I hope that we'll be able to do a lot more around and just affirm that. Katha, what have been the successful vehicles for getting Brookline for everyone's message out? Websites, social media sites, visibility in local media. Can you give us some ideas about the vehicles that people can use? I know Jeff said Facebook and Twitter, but if you could help us figure that out, that'd be great.
So I think in the beginning, there was a lot of activity on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter's not so active anymore because of Twitter. But there's a lot of action on Facebook. Brookline for Everyone set up. It has a Facebook page, and it did a lot of organizing through that and sort of alerts through that. And it now has, I think, an Instagram page. I don't do the social media. I just know about it because I mostly focus on the website. And we redid the website this fall, last fall, and really enhanced it and gave it a lot more just visibility. And we use that all throughout the election. We had lots of activities that we could announce on the website, and people could then sign up for them through the website, sort of driven there both by the Facebook page and by the newsletter. And it became a platform where we could have forms for people to fill out. Anybody who could, you know, get involved in the election, we could set up ways for them to be contacted. It became a really great platform to just keep things organized and energized. Yeah, it's sort of standard stuff. You know, when people talk about message, you know, how do you get your message out? There's various social media platforms, and if you have someone who's good at them, they're gold, right? Because most people aren't. They sometimes use them, but they're not great at them. So if you have people who are good at them, they're really great, and it's a really good way to involve, especially Instagram and Twitter. I don't know what's going to happen with Twitter, but certainly Instagram right now is sort of the hot social media platform. And if you it's a great way to engage young people, because there's this demographic thing of, you know, equity and inclusion. There's also an age issue. that the people many of the people who were involved in housing related stuff are kind of my age and not Catherine's age. She has young kids, I have older kids, and so I think that, getting, teenagers and high school students engaged in this project takes a whole concentrated effort, which we haven't cracked yet.
Thank you, but you're getting there. Is there any sort of work that happens to go to media, newspapers, letters to the editor? Is there any sort of that kind of outreach?
Yeah, the tricky part is there's no newspaper in Brookline anymore. There is now, but there wasn't. There was when Brookline for Everyone started, and sending letters to the editor was a thing, as I recall. I wasn't really involved in Brookline for Everyone when it started, but as I recall, there was a lot of feedback for that, and then the blank. What did you say? What was the other question about? Oh, letters to the editor and talking to people. When there was a newspaper, there was real communication, letters to the editor, all that kind of stuff. And now we've been talking with the new local newspaper.
Great. Thank you so much, Katha. So important to know what those vehicles are to get in touch with people and do outreach and education. This next question is for Jeff. To incorporate or not to incorporate? That is the question. So currently, Brookline for Everyone is set up as a 501c4 and as a PAC. Maybe you could describe what those are all about, because it's confusing. There's a 501c3, there's a 501c4, and the decision to set up those structures would be helpful. And do you see any benefits of remaining a scrappy, unincorporated group? And then also, I know this is a lot in 4 minutes, Jeff, but what is the legal process of becoming a 501c4 and a PAC? So just do the best you can. We can always go back in the Q&A too.
Sure, thanks. So as I mentioned earlier, we knew that the political side of things was going to be a big part of what we were all about, right? It was about identifying new potential town meeting members and select board candidates that would be supportive of new housing initiatives in town. And so because of that, we knew we needed to set ourselves up as a political action committee at the municipal level. So we are not a state level political action committee. We are a municipal PAC, which allows us to raise money and spend money in local elections. That process is, there are some forms that the town clerk's office has, their state level forms. So I believe they're the same forms everywhere. And you pretty much just fill out the form and drop them off at town hall. Setting up a bank account, things like that, so we can have somewhere to raise money into. So that was a primary element. But then we recognized that the problem with municipal political action committees is that you're really restricted to only spend money on local elections. You have more restrictions on what you can say on state races, state legislative races, federal races, etc. So we landed on the idea of setting up as a 501c4 to give us some flexibility in that regard. So as you mentioned, there's a 501c3 and a 501c4 high level, and I'm sure a lawyer might be aghast at how I'm describing this, but essentially a 501c3 is a nonprofit where your contributions are tax deductible, and you're really focused on achieving a specific aim for the betterment of the community. A C4 has that as a major element of it, but it also is allowed to play in the political realm as long as a minority of your spending goes toward politics. So this allows us to raise money to spend on lobbying efforts on our website, on getting the message out, on setting up tables in around town to kind of explain what it is we're all about, why pro-housing matters, what it means to be pro-housing, all of those sorts of things. So we're able to do that without being quite as careful about only focusing on the hyperlocal electoral stuff. I think there's definitely some benefits to being a scrappy unincorporated group, although I think from a political engagement standpoint, I think you create a possibility for some potential challenges depending on how much money you're raising, how much of an impact you're able to make. I think if you're just getting started, it makes sense to kind of maybe start as a scrappy group and really just kind of connect with people that you're able to identify and kind of work on the margins, or even glom onto another group that already exists and support some of their oftentimes there's equity groups in a lot of towns and cities, and you can show up to that with a housing perspective to try to bring that to a broader audience. So there's definitely some value there. And then as far as the legal process, we set up in a very simple, straightforward way. There's forms you find on federal websites around how you set that up. We've incorporated with the state so that we can exist as an entity with the state, setting up board members and things like that, just so that we can be officially an entity with the state.
Did you need to hire an attorney, or you could do that on your own?
So we did it on our own. I think there are definitely some benefits to probably fewer headaches if you're able to hire an attorney to help get that set up. It was a lot of learning and figuring out which form we actually needed, and just kind of doing a lot of individual research. It's certainly doable, particularly when there's limited, when you have limited funds to be able to set up. You can do it on your own, although if you're able to hire a lawyer to set it up, it's certainly a lot easier that way.
Jonathan's timing is just perfect because we just asked about, do you need an attorney to set up a 501c4 or C3? So John, I'd like to introduce our last panelist. Welcome. We have had some robust discussion already. So Jonathan Klein moved to Coolidge Corner with his wife, Amy, as an empty nester in 2008 after raising their family in Boston. He is a recently retired attorney, having spent most of his career representing nonprofit affordable housing developers, and he co-founded and was a general counsel at the Community Builders, one of the nation's major nonprofit housing providers. So I want to welcome Jonathan as our fourth panelist, and we'll just get you right in there, Jonathan, and ask you a question. So we've talked a little bit about the origins of Brookline for Everyone. It would be interesting to hear about the leadership structure. So how is Brookline for Everyone's leadership structure evolved since the beginning? And Jeff just mentioned that in order to go through the paperwork, you need to have a board. So this is a little bit redundant, but do you have a board, the positions on a board, such as board president, secretary, and how do people get on the board and into positions? And I know that you have a little bit of your own history of how you got involved in Brookline for Everyone and on the leadership as well.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone for being here. What a great crowd. It's great to see everyone, including, a number of familiar names in the audience. I'll just answer the last question before I get to that really, really quickly, which is that we didn't have an attorney to do all that, but that's because Jeff was really terrific and smart and did a lot of research on his own and, figured it all out. So for many groups, having help from an attorney, a pro bono attorney, or if you have to pay an attorney a a reasonable amount to help you figure that stuff out is probably a worthwhile thing. Maybe I'm self-interested because I am an attorney and I worked with a lot of nonprofit groups in my career. But let me move on to talk about leadership. We've had a pretty organic leadership, I would say. We do have a board and it's formalized and we invite people to be on it. It's sort of a by invitation board. We have not had a robust sort of membership function where we have big meetings and elect the board, but we've looked at people we think would contribute and be helpful and, bring skills and energy and commitment. And then, we invite them to join us. And that's how I came on. I was invited to join by, the original people who formed Brookline for Everyone. And I was really, honored and pleased to do that. I sort of merged another smaller organization into the group and then joined the board. We do have formal positions. Amanda's our president. I'm the treasurer. I think we have a secretary. I'm not sure who it is. So we operate more informally, most of the time, but as the treasurer, I'm responsible for the bank accounts and the accounting and getting the checks deposited. And, Amanda, and with a lot of help from Jeff, I know, kind of organizes us and plans agendas and runs meetings. So we have had a pretty low level of organization, but with some formality. And I think that's helped us, especially as an incorporated organization. We need to have a board, and the board needs to know that they're, responsible for the organization and have, a fiduciary responsibility to attend to the organization's affairs. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's my quick answer. I know we're trying to be efficient and brief here.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We're going to go into some, a big question that people have is the use of surveys for political candidates. So I know Brookline for Everyone started in 2019, and I think Jeff had told me before that surveyed political candidates the following year. But I'm going to ask for that story again. When did you start sending out surveys to political candidates? And at what point in Brookline for Everyone's development did you decide to actually endorse candidates? Sometimes there's the fear that what if you endorse a candidate and you are not yet powerful, then could that strategy backfire? So we're going to start, we have 4 minutes on that. We'll start with Jeff on that, and then if there's time, Jonathan can add and finish out the 4 minutes.
Yeah, so we started endorsing, like you said, at the first election. As a town, we elect our town meeting and select board every May, and so we put together a survey with some high level. Do you understand how the impact that housing unaffordability has on people, how we can address it, trying to get, and we used it, especially that first time, as much as a way to identify people on town meeting that were going to be our friends. It was really helpful to kind of get some of their kind of pros answers back on how they viewed housing. And some people definitely answered with, I don't really know how housing plays into it. Can you help me learn more? And so that was a great opportunity to also educate folks on how we view the housing issues. As far as endorsing, if we're not powerful enough, I still am a little unsure how powerful we really are. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to get folks kind of on the record or thinking about these issues. And I definitely there are people that we've sent these questionnaires out to that their answers were not very supportive of housing. Those responses have kind of decreased over the years as people know who we are a little bit more. But it was also really helpful to kind of understand which town meeting members and potential candidates disagreed with our perspective on things, or might have viewed housing affordability challenges in a different way. So we definitely we make sure we send them to every candidate who's registered. Our town clerk posts all of the candidates who pulled papers in order to run, and that includes their contact information. So we're able to email those. It's a Google form that we send out. And at this point, we use basically the same questions every year. There's usually 1 or 2 questions that's more specifically relevant to either current issues going on. So this year we talked about the Indian Community Act, and in past town meeting articles, and kind of how they voted or how they would have voted and why. Just kind of get a feel for that, and to also let people know where we stand on things.
And I'll just add to that if I can. You know, we're lucky to have Jeff, and we've had some other people who are kind of, I know this is like data nerds, basically, right? Who are able to organize all this data and collect it, and especially collect, you know, people's past votes. You know, we have a town meeting form of government in Brookline, so we're dealing with 255 town meeting members and 5 select board members and other elected offices. So it's a lot to keep track of. But I think over time, the strategy has really been worthwhile, and we've built our brand, you know, as an organization that matters. It's not just about endorsing candidates. It's also about them delivering for the candidates we've endorsed, right? So it's sending out, you know, mailers and promoting them and trying to create slates in the precincts. And, you know, Catherine has done a great job this past, you know, election of helping us with our election strategy of, you know, texting and calling and you know, really helping out the candidates that we endorse. So it's both figuring out who our friends are and then endorsing them, and then it is you know, trying to organize materials to help them and help them get elected. You know, we've had some good years and some bad years. This past year was a pretty good year, you know, thankfully, but that's politics, right?
That's a great segue to our last question before we open it up to everyone who's here. And this question is for Catherine, and it's about the campaign strategy. So this is just really flowing tonight. Catherine, what are some of the best campaign strategies to get pro-housing candidates elected? I know Jonathan mentioned some of the techniques, but what's your thought on that? And even, can you tell us a little bit about the text banking strategy, and how you get voter lists? These are some questions that people had asked who are here tonight. And are there strategies that might work better with town meeting member election or a city council election? I know that might be beyond the purview of what you've done for this, but if you could just in general address the most effective campaign strategies, especially because it's your research too, which is great.
Yeah, no, I think the key thing, the first is that higher turnout is going to favor pro-housing candidates. So you want to do things that are going to increase turnout, ideally amongst people likely to support pro-housing candidates. But the second part is we need to make it really easy for people. So all of you on this call, you are great, you are wonderful, but you're also really weird, right? You're on a Zoom call on a weeknight about like housing policy and how to elect pro-housing people. The people you need to get out to vote are not thinking about this at all, or if they are, they're not necessarily connecting it to their local election, right? So talk to lots of people, tell them you're the pro-housing people, tell them who to vote for, where to go, what to do, make it really, really easy. So if you look in Brookline, in 2021, the town elections was like a higher, like not terrible turnout, and a very strong pro-housing progressive candidate got elected. In 2022, the turnout was lower, and the like aggressively some groups that are not as friendly towards housing elected a lot of people to town meeting, and every seat was up because it was after a redistricting year. So we know that at least in this town, the overwhelming majority agrees with us. We need more housing at all price points and all configurations so that people can afford to stay here, to retire here, to grow their families here. And so we knew basically that the more we could engage people to vote, the better our pro-housing candidates were likely to do. We decided to push towards people that were not always voting in town meeting. They've already got their minds made up. They know what they're doing. So we aggressively communicated to people we thought were likely to turn out in this election because they had voted in other stuff. Maybe they didn't vote in every town meeting election, but we thought we could get them out for this one. We also made a huge push to several overlapping demographics. People in multi-unit housing, people under 60, And people who live in one of our public school catchments, because there was a ballot initiative about funding that school. So we knew that turnout was going to be higher in that area as well. Because Brookline is very dense and there's lots of apartments and it's very, very hard to canvass apartments, we chose to focus on sending mail and sending text messages. So we aggressively texted people in multi-unit housing under a certain age limit. And we sent mail to people who had some voting history, but we set a floor for the age on the mailers. No offense to anyone on this call, if you're under 30, we don't think you read your mail, no offense. And mailers are expensive, right? So we wanted to really target those where we were going to get the most juice from the squeeze, basically. We ran a town-wide campaign. We pushed people towards our website. We had endorsements for the specific precincts on our website. And so I think another big strategy, thanks Julia, is economies of scale. Like where can you save money, by printing one thing and then sending it to everybody with either all the names on it or directing people towards a website so they can get the specific list for their precinct. And I'll stop there.
It was a stunning victory. It was incredible. And so this is the official panel. And what we're going to do is actually stop the recording right now.